Have you ever walked into a room and felt it instantly? Not a sound, not a look, just a shift. Someone rubs their nose. Another person leans away. A chair scrapes back, subtle but deliberate. The air feels heavier now. And then the thought lands. Sharp. Uninvited. It's me. You don't see anything wrong. Your clothes are clean. You showered. You checked your breath twice. Still the feeling stays. Your skin tightens. Your chest compresses. Your heart starts negotiating. What if I missed something? What if I can't smell myself? You inhale deeply, nothing. But that doesn't help, because the fear isn't about what you smell. It's about what they might be smelling. And once that thought takes root, it doesn't ask for permission. The human mind is built to protect us from social danger. Long before language, before cities, before mirrors, rejection meant isolation. Isolation meant death. So the brain learned to watch closely. Every glance, every cough, every micro-expression. It reads faces faster than facts. It assumes intent before evidence. But what happens when that survival system malfunctions? What happens when the brain doesn't just detect danger, but creates it? There is a psychological condition where people become convinced they emit a foul, offensive odor. Rotten. Sweaty. Decaying. No medical cause. No confirmation from others. No physical evidence. Just certainty. This is known as Olfactory Reference Syndrome. And once it settles into the mind, it doesn't scream, it whispers. Segment 1. The Unseen Prison. Olfactory Reference Syndrome, often called ORS, is not really about smell. It's about interpretation. People with ORS believe their body produces an unbearable odor. From their breath, their sweat, their skin, their hair, their genitals, sometimes even from inside their body. But here's what makes ORS so psychologically disturbing. The odor doesn't need to be perceived. It only needs to be assumed. Someone scratches their nose. That's not a habit, it's a reaction. A coworker opens a window. That's not fresh air, it's escape. A stranger shifts their weight, steps back half an inch. That's confirmation. The brain becomes a prosecutor, assembling a case from fragments. Neutral behaviors are no longer neutral. They are clues. The world becomes a crime scene, and the crime is you. Slowly, reality turns hostile. Public spaces feel like interrogation rooms. Buses feel claustrophobic. Elevators feel lethal. Every social interaction becomes a silent trial where the verdict is always the same. Guilty. Many sufferers begin showering compulsively. Not once, not twice, sometimes 10 times a day. They scrub until their skin burns. They brush their teeth until their gums bleed. They floss obsessively. They gargle chemicals. They rotate through deodorants, soaps, antiseptics, medical treatments. Some seek repeated dental procedures. Others attempt extreme cleansing rituals. There are cases of people trying to remove imagined sources of odor through dangerous means. And still the anxiety never lifts. Because ORS isn't driven by dirt. It's driven by certainty without evidence. The brain locks onto one belief, I smell bad. And then it protects that belief like a survival truth. Reassurance doesn't help. Compliments feel staged. Silence feels condemning. Over time, the person doesn't just fear being smelled. They begin to define themselves by it. Their identity collapses inward. Not a student, not a partner, not a colleague, not a friend. Just a problem occupying space. And the most terrifying part? From the inside, this belief feels completely rational. Segment 2. When the brain becomes the accuser. To understand olfactory reference syndrome, you have to understand how the brain decides what's real. Smell is the most ancient of the senses. It bypasses rational thought. It bypasses language. It goes straight to emotion, memory, and threat detection. That's why a scent can make your heart race before you know why. In ORS, this system is hijacked. The brain doesn't hallucinate a smell floating in the air. Not like hearing voices or seeing shapes. Instead, it hallucinates judgment. The person becomes convinced that others detect something wrong. This makes ORS uniquely destructive, because it feeds on social feedback loops. A glance becomes a verdict. A pause becomes proof. A smile becomes forced politeness. A laugh becomes mockery. Clinically, ORS exists at the crossroads of several disorders. Obsessive-compulsive disorder, where intrusive thoughts refuse to release their grip. Social anxiety disorder, where fear of evaluation dominates perception. Body dysmorphic disorder, where identity collapses into a single imagined flaw. In severe cases, ORS crosses into delusional intensity, not because the person is irrational, but because the belief becomes emotionally bulletproof. Logic cannot disarm it, because the belief isn't built on facts, it's built on interpretation. And once the brain commits to a narrative, I am offensive to others, it begins filtering reality to protect that story. Reassurance becomes suspicious. Why would they tell me the truth? They're just being polite. They don't want to hurt me. Kindness is reinterpreted as deception. Silence becomes confirmation. Distance becomes mercy. Gradually, the mind stops asking, "Is this true?" and starts asking, "How bad is it?" That shift is devastating because it signals surrender. Segment 3 lives shrunk by an invisible fear. ORS doesn't announce itself dramatically. It erodes lives quietly. People begin avoiding public places. They stop using public transport. They refuse elevators. They stand instead of sitting near others. Dating becomes impossible. Friendships fade. Conversations are rationed. Some refuse to speak without covering their mouths. Others carry gum, mints, tissues, perfumes, emergency defenses against an invisible threat. Careers are abandoned. Education is interrupted. Opportunities disappear not from rejection but avoidance. There are documented cases of people isolating themselves for years, not because they were rejected, but because they anticipated rejection, and anticipation can be just as powerful as reality. In the darkest cases, ORS has been linked to profound depression and suicidal ideation. Because imagine living with this belief, that everywhere you go, you are silently offending everyone around you, and no one will confirm it. No one will confront you. No one will acknowledge it. That silence becomes unbearable. The mind reaches a cruel conclusion. If no one will say anything, then I must be too disgusting to talk about. At that point, the odor is no longer the fear. Existence itself becomes the problem. The twist in application. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You don't need olfactory reference syndrome to recognize its machinery. Have you ever replayed a conversation in your head, convincing yourself you sounded awkward? Have you ever noticed someone checking their phone and assumed you were boring them? That's the same mental engine. ORS is what happens when the brain's fear of social rejection becomes sensory certainty. It turns anxiety into evidence. In a culture obsessed with hygiene, image, presentation, and self-optimization, this condition doesn't feel strange. It feels logical, and that's why it hides so well. Because the mind isn't asking, "Am I imagining this?" It's asking, "Why would everyone react this way if it wasn't true?" That question traps people, not in madness, but in meaning. Olfactory reference syndrome leaves us with a darker question. If the brain can convince you that you smell wrong, what else can it convince you about yourself? Your voice, your face, your presence. There are conditions where people believe their organs are rotting, where they believe they are already dead, where the world feels artificial, staged, unreal. Each one reveals the same terrifying truth. Reality isn't what we see. It's what the brain allows us to believe. And once you realize how fragile that process really is, you start to wonder how much of you is perception and how much is assumption. And that is why you need to watch the next videos.